thank you so much for coming, everybody. This is so exciting because we're really kind of just getting back to live.
Yeah, thanks for leaving your house. I know it's a big deal.
We'll try to make it worth it, right?
Yes.
We promise. Yeah, exactly. So when I got both books in the mail, which is always exciting, as we all know, right? I couldn't decide which one to read first. So I started with Good Company, and I'm glad I did because now I'm doing The Nest, and it's been fun to sort of read the second book first. So the hardcover came out a year ago.
Yes.
But then paperback is this week or
last week.
Last week, exactly. So it's neat because we all know that when the paperback comes out, it just bumps it to a new level in terms of audience.
A lot of book groups, for very understandable reasons, have a paperback policy. And so it's always fun for me because there is like a whole new wave of readers. And, also it came out, still in the middle of a pandemic, and it, I never left my house, so I know how hard it is to leave your house. And I did that whole book tour from my office.
Tell us first, just for people who haven't and people who will be watching us also, just the plot.
Sure. So Good Company focuses on two married couples who have been friends for a very long time, for decades. They all met in their 20s in New York City. 3 of the 4 people were in the theater world. And in the present time of the book, it's 20, 25 years later. One couple has a teenage daughter who's about to graduate from high school. They all live in Los Angeles. They've all sort of migrated from New York to Los Angeles. And there's this isn't a spoiler because it happens in the first line of the book. One of the women, Flora, is looking for a photo to give to her daughter for her college graduation. And while she's looking for this photo, she finds an old wedding ring of her husband's that he supposedly lost swimming one summer in a pond. So that revelation sort of opens up a Pandora's box of secrets that the characters spend the rest of the book figuring out.
The interesting thing, of course, that makes it a novel that is same in real life is that a revelation like that, or question like that, doesn't just affect that marriage.
Right.
It fans out, and especially in middle age, it affects your whole world.
Yeah. Things happen sometimes in life, and you have to rewrite that story of what you thought your life was. And that's always that's just an interesting space for a novelist. So although it wasn't pleasant for the characters, I enjoyed living it very much, vicariously. So it's, it was just an interesting place to go, and also just to go into the lives of middle-aged people. I was really very interested in exploring that point in life where everything's not possibility. You've made decisions, you've closed certain doors. Not everything is potential anymore. You are living a life. You are not anticipating a life.
Kind of like a course assessment.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things you've said too is that, say The Nest and even this story, there's the theme of, say, the possibility of infidelity or the inheritance of the nest. But at the end of the day, it's really about the interactions between people,
right,
and feelings and relationships. And that's something that we really have to confront in midlife, those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, as you go through these series of phases as humans, and your relationships change. If you have children, your life sort of revolves around them for a while, and then they're gone, and a lot of people find themselves having to course correct, and sometimes it works out beautifully, and sometimes it doesn't. A funny thing happened when I started writing this book. A lot of my friends started getting divorced, and it was, well, some of them weren't shocking. Some of them you're like, how did you make it that long? But some of them were really shocking, and it wasn't anything dramatic. It wasn't like I caught you cheating or you gambled, the mortgage money. It was just, we have outgrown this relationship, and it's sad and it's hard, but it's what's going to happen next. And I had a lot of conversations with many friends about how they sort of navigated that went into Good Company.
So we have kind of the four main characters, the two couples, and then we also have we have Ruby.
We have Ruby.
Right, Flora's daughter, Julian's daughter, who is sort of the thread that ties everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
And for much of the novel, Ruby is sort of, she's present, but we see her through the adult character's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not till later on that Ruby gets her own sort of spotlight,
right,
which I thought was really interesting. And that's, I loved that too.
Yeah.
That we sort of, Ruby then becomes an adult, that we...
Right.
Right.
With her own opinions and her own view of the world and
right.
her parents and her parents' friends and, what people expect from her and
her own frailties.
What's important. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was sort of a beautiful the way that happened, I thought, or the way that you did that, because we sort of didn't meet her until she was ready for us to meet her.
Right. Yeah. Well, she's Ruby.
That's right.
Took her own time, yeah.
Except Ruby time. One of the things, too, that reviewers and that your fans have all noted is the way that you're able to present each character's, give them their time, give them their voice and their point of view, without, a lot have said, without judgment, that you've been able to present them without judgment. And that's really hard to do.
Well, I really don't judge them, and I really do love them all. And that, I feel, is key to creating characters that people relate to, because I can always feel it if the author has created a character to make a point about something, and then that person does not ceases to feel real to me.
Right, they're like a plot vehicle versus a...
I think that when I first wrote The Nest and I finished the first draft, I remember reading it back, and one of the characters in particular I felt was not working, and I realized that exact thing was happening. I didn't really like her that much, and I was writing her to judge her and to judge her choices. And as soon as I stopped that and started thinking to myself, well, what makes this person vulnerable? Like, what would really destroy this person? And sort of wrote into that space a little bit. She became a much stronger character, and it was just a good lesson for me as an author that I can't, it doesn't serve the book to have me judging people. And one of the joys of writing an alternate point of view is that you're able to live in everyone's skin a little bit. And when you put those shoes on, you understand a different perspective. And it's much easier to do it when you're writing a novel than it is in real life. But I'm 61. I'm a more empathetic person than I was when I was 25 or 31. And I do think that there's a million sides to every story. So, that's just kind of where I try and sit.
I think that's one of the gifts of middle age that I've just recently learned to appreciate, is that you face yourself too. Mm-hmm. And you see Flora struggling even with that too. You have this child that you just pour everything you have into, but you have to sort of face who you are and the choices that you've made as well.
Right, and especially, it still falls on women to do so much of the work. It is much harder to balance career and parenting, and you do it. I think it's very natural if for no other reason than you're exhausted, to lose yourself a little bit. And then to sort of, as your kids get older and they become more independent, so much of your life has been figuring out what they need, and then all of a sudden you have to sort of come face to face with yourself and with your own future, and that's definitely where Flora is, which makes the revelation that there's something in her life that she didn't know about even harder, because she's already in a fraught place, and so that's just intensifies it.
Right. You can feel her having to find her way toward accepting herself too, and what she wants. We talked about characters and developing characters. I'm always fascinated as a reader to find out how your characters develop for you. In the case of Good Company, how did your characters develop?
Well, I always envisioned it that there would be two couples. So they come to me very slowly is the answer. And it's as simple as trying to figure out their backstory, trying to figure out what they look like, trying to figure out where they grew up, just really basic things. And then, pretty as quickly as I can, I start writing in scene, because that will help me figure them out. Ruby was an exception. Ruby came to me almost fully formed, and every time I had to write one of her scenes, it was like she was sitting in my office talking. It was just sheer pleasure that really does not happen very often, at least not to me. And so that was fun.
I wondered about that because you have sons, and the main, right, and the sort of central child character was a girl, and I wondered if that was...
I don't know. My friend Ruman Alam, after he read the book, said to me, I feel like you wrote yourself the daughter you didn't have. And I certainly never thought about it that way. I think that, my kids are in their 20s, but I'm still a little hesitant to write about sons. I don't want any of, I want to protect their privacy. I don't write autobiographically at all, but I just feel like I'm feeling less that way now. I think the next book is going to have teenage boys. Now that I've written two, and now that they've read them, and I just worried that they would think, even if it wasn't them, like nobody who you actually write about in a book sees themselves, but people who you've never in a million years thought about are like, I think I'm that person, right? And you're like, no, I'm not. I don't know what's
you don't want
how
to
that happened, but no. And
like, sorry,
no.
I
just would shy away from writing mothers and sons. It just felt like private.
Too close.
But I love teenage girls. I think that I went to an all-girls high school, and I actually had a great high school experience, and I think it's very easy for me to go back into a teenage girl's point of view because I enjoyed that time. So it's kind of easy for me to access that, but I just, like, teenage girls crack me up. I just enjoy them.
She is very funny, right? This is also a bi-coastal story, which it's interesting because for us in the Midwest, sometimes it feels like that, happens without us sometimes.
Right.
But growing up in New York, I had there's this fascination with the West Coast. I don't know, do they have the fascination with the East Coast?
They do not.
They don't care. I've gotten that impression too.
It's so funny because I when I did my event last week in Los Angeles, I was talking to my friend Jane Chang, who did it with me, and she said, well, what did people want to talk about with a hardcover? And I said, well, I got a lot of New York versus LA questions. And she said, ugh, that was like my least favorite thing to talk about. And it's like, oh, I forgot. Nobody in Los Angeles wants to talk. Everyone in New York wants to talk about it. No. And I can only really specifically speak about Angelenos, but they do not care. I mean, they know that people in New York think that Los Angeles is lesser, and they just think everyone's like just
Oh, being judged, or that they're being judged.
Yeah, but they're
don't
just
care.
like, well, they've never, it's because they've never lived here, which I would have to say 90% of the time is true. It's like someone in New York visited their cousin once in 1988, and that person lived like deep in the valley, and they spent every day driving to the beach, and they're like, wow, how could you live here? It's like, well, no one who lives here would ever do that. But
yeah, no, that's true, because growing up, I remember it was like this golden, like, oh, you know. And,
well, it is I have to say, it's a pretty magical place to live. And, you know, just the whole state is special. People in San Francisco hate Los Angeles too, so that's the craziest thing I've ever encountered. I have to say, it's one of the craziest things I've ever encountered in my life. I'm just like, really? I like both places. I'm sorry you can only like one.
That's funny, I know. You know, other thing that struck me too about Good Company, and I wonder if other readers found this, is that it wasn't until the end that I realized that while this was very much a modern story, it didn't really have an official timestamp on it. In that, in The Nest, there's references more to like technology, which, as we all know, sort of really is sort of the marker, right, for stories now. Which type of phone did the characters have is what, you know, just dates them later on. But in this, I wondered, was that a conscious choice at all? In that it's sort of like, it feels like it could be happening today, but there's not really, I guess there's a little bit with Broadway and the shows and the entertainment industry a bit.
Yeah.
But nothing that would really super date it either.
I mean, it gets tedious writing about, you know, phones and voicemails and texts. And
becomes a crutch, yeah, I bet.
Yeah, and it also just, you never know how it's going to be dated at some point. And I think I just really wanted this book to focus as much as I possibly could on character, and to sort of not indulge those other details that didn't really feel important. They're more like set dressing. So that's not just what I picked, you know.
And I could see where in The Nest, some of those things were really central to some of the character issues, right?
Well, I mean, The Nest was very much, to me, a post-2008 financial crisis book. And so that had to be in there. Like, that was very relevant to the story. This is a very personal story about friendship and marriage and parenting and ambition, and so it just wasn't that necessary.
One of the things too that a lot of reviewers have noted, and that I felt as a reader, was your ability to really evoke the nuance of characters' personalities and situations and their internal thoughts. But you've talked about the fact that that was hard for you. It feels very effort's, you know. Thank you, writing process. But
yeah, I mean, it's not. No, the book was not easy. Was not effortless. I don't think any book ever is, but it was. You know, I really wanted, after coming off of The Nest, I wanted to write a book that was more focused, where I stuck with characters for longer periods of time and went a little deeper. And yeah, it's just harder. When you're moving around a lot and you have a lot, you know, you sort of have like a bunch of, it's like I always describe The Nest as a 3-ring circus. It's like, oh, you don't like that storyline? We'll come over here for this one. And that was really fun to write, and in a way easier, because you're a little bit more on the surface. And this one just was harder because I had to really stick with my people.
Something I know you've been asked a lot about is the difference between, you know, that first book, the first child, and then the second child.
When you're writing your first book, no one's watching you. And so it feels like this private little, possibly incredibly foolish venture that you're engaging in, and then, you know, and then you, if you're lucky, like I was, you spend a year talking about the book, but not really writing. And then when you go back to start writing again, you just, there was on a particularly ridiculous day, I Googled, how do you write a second novel? And this article came up where they interviewed Jeffrey Eugenides and Donna Tartt, and there was one other person. all of whom took a very long time between their first and second novel. But Jeffrey Eugenides said, when you write your first novel, you have no awareness of yourself as an author. And then when you sit down to write the second one, that's all you're thinking about. And I really had to work for a long time before I stopped second guessing everything I was doing. I didn't second guess anything I did with The Nest. I thought, no one's ever reading this thing. I may as well entertain myself. I'll throw in this, I'll throw in that other thing. I was truly just having fun. And I'm not sure you can ever really do that with anything other than your first book.
And then, of course, after your first book, you have fans. As you said,
right.
It's not just for you anymore.
Right.
Now you've got a community
right.
That's tied into you through your novel. What was that like?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think about that. I feel like that way danger lies. If you're writing for people, you're already throwing yourself off, like you're throwing your inner compass off. And I still have to just write to please myself. And the thing I did constantly remind myself of is, well, people like The Nest because they like the way I write. And so all I can do is write the way I write and hope that they like this story too. And of course, not everyone's going to like it, but maybe some people who didn't like The Nest will like this one. That's really as far as my thoughts went. I never go on Goodreads, I never go on Amazon, so I'm not actually really aware of what people think about my books, which is good. And that's all I can do, because I'm the person who has to write the book. And I don't want this to be drudgery, even though there are hard days. It has to feel like my venture.
It makes you think of if this had all happened for you at a younger age,
right? How
different that could have been.
Yeah, and I think and for good reason. I think that because it happened to me in middle age, I also understood how precarious success is. Like it's of course, like I worked really hard on the book. I have a great team behind me, but it's also a little bit of luck. It's just, we're talking about the books that were published during the early days of the pandemic, the early weeks. I mean, some of it is just timing and luck and having a book resonate with people and all things that are really out of your control. The only thing I can control is feeling like I've done the best I can do for the story I'm writing.
At the same time, what was it like to kind of come out of that cocoon and then meet people who loved what you did?
I mean, it was bonkers. It was great. I mean, it was great.
It blew up really fast.
Yeah, it was. I mean, to be honest, I don't even remember some of it. It was very overwhelming and very exciting. And I worried the entire time that I would never write another book. So it was just all of those feelings, like gratitude and excitement and imposter syndrome and really at a certain point just this feeling like I have to do it again. And I remember thinking when I was trying to finish The Nest, I think I said this to a friend of mine who's a writer, like, I just want to get this book done because then the second one will be so much easier. And she was like, oh, baby, I have no idea what you're talking about, but yeah, good luck. So.
Well, we'll let you think that,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What did bring you back?
Reading. There's obviously something so great about doing events like these, and there's nothing like meeting readers, especially writing is such a solitary business, and you're just in your office all day, and then you get to come out, and people, especially with The Nest, people would sort of hang around after an event and tell me, crazy stories about their family money, problems, and I love that. And when that was all finally over, I went to Europe, and then I came back, and it was time for the paperback tour, and I went out again, and I was on a vacation with friends of mine, and just sort of saying, the minute I get home, I have to get right back to work. And my friend Jessica said to me, why? Like, why can't you take the summer off? Don't underestimate how much what you've just gone through has messed with your head. And that felt like really solid advice, and I took the summer off, and I told myself that all I was gonna do was read without any agenda, just like talking about yourself for a solid year is really soul deadening. Like, I mean, after a while, you just can't even stand it. And so I felt like I needed to fill up the tank with what I loved, with other people's creative work, and with language and with stories, and I just needed to keep reading and like fill that tank up. And then I had to get back to work, and the first few months were hard, but eventually I was able to just connect with the book, and that felt really good.
So what's next for you now? Are you working on a third, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm starting to, but I'm just at the beginning, and I'm traveling for all this month, which is lovely. So I'm on a little pause, but yeah, trying to get a new book started.
At the end of the day, why do you do this? Why do you write?
That's a very good question. It's the only thing I know how to do. I mean, honestly, it's always been my job. I do enjoy it, but I don't know what else I would do. I don't have many other marketable skills. So, and I love fiction. I love novels. It feels very magical to me that I get to do it. It doesn't necessarily feel magical in the day-to-day grind of it, but big picture, it feels magical.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Before we go, though, I want to recommend to everyone, if you haven't gone to Cynthia's website, it's a lot of fun. And one of the funniest things that I would recommend to is the book video for The Nest.
Starring St. Louis's own Ellie Kemper.
That's right.
My siblings are nothing like the siblings in The Nest.
A lot of people's stories are very similar. It's still your own story.
You are an older brother, a middle sister, and a youngest sister forever.
I'm very close with my brothers, and I am intermittently in touch with my sisters.
My older brother's name is John, my younger sister's name is Carrie, and my younger brother's name is Billy, although I think he's making the transition to Bill.
It's a big group. I felt like a lot of them were in charge of my twin sister and I for a long time, so there was a lot of resentment about being in charge of two adorable scene-stealing twins.
We're only 1 minute apart. I wish we were both born at the same time.
She was like amazing at piano. I suck. She's sporty. I'm a complete spaz.
She's really smart.
She's not so smart.
I'm not so smart.
No.
It kind of was like a weird Catholic, unfun, non-musical Von Trapp family.
My older brother and I did not get along. Very frustrating because he was so much bigger than I was that it was like when we would get into a fight, it was like I was fighting a man.
We were all watching TV, and I made a decision to bring up the mixer into the bathroom upstairs that had 2 doors that locked. 10 minutes later, during the next commercial break, I brought up the milk.
There was a lot of I don't care who started it and that kind of thing. And it was like, well, it's kind of important, I think. I understand that you are burned out because you had 6 kids, but it was hardly my idea.